Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Anatomy by Dr. Vijaya. Today's topic will be neuroanatomy of the basal nuclei. So this is the second part where I'll be covering the functions and disorders related to basal nuclei.
So basal ganglia part 2, where I'll be discussing the major functions and introduction to the disorders, that is mainly the Parkinson's disease and the Huntington's disease. A quick recap on the functions of the basal ganglia. So I had mentioned that both basal ganglia and cerebellum, they form a parallel extrapyramidal system, so they don't have a direct influence or control over the spinal cord, that is the lower motor neurons of the spinal cord, but they regulate and control the motor movements, that is the voluntary movements, through connection with the cerebral cortex and the brain stem. So basal ganglia and the major components are the corpus striatum, which includes caudate nucleus, lentiform nucleus, and along with that it has subthalamic nucleus and substantia nigra. Okay, so this picture I had shown in my video on neuroanatomy of cerebellum. So the primary voluntary movements mainly comes from the stimulus, comes from the motor cortex, that is from the cerebrum, but the these movements are supported and these are made finer and smoother and coordinated by the help by the information coming from the basal ganglia and the cerebellum. So there is also connection with the reticular system present in the brain stem. So this mainly helps in coordinating the movements and also maintaining the muscle tone. So if you see basal ganglia, so mainly they help in initiating the movements. Okay, they also support the movements. So their primary role is the motor control, and together with that they have other roles such as motor learning skills. Okay, so developing the motor learning skills, then cognitive functions, especially the caudate nucleus is associated with that. Then cognitive or the executive functions and behavior and emotions. Okay, since they are associated with the frontal lobes of the cerebral cortex and also with the amygdala, which is related to the limbic system. So they also help in initiating or breaking. So if you see stereotype movements, these are unwanted movement, okay, unwanted repetitive movements. So these are inhibited or stopped by the basal ganglia. Okay, and basal ganglia also helps in initiating the movements through different pathway. So the pathway which I have already discussed in my first video, that is the direct and indirect pathway. Along with that, it also helps in preparedness to the movement. Okay, so if any movement before initiating, there should be preparedness. So for example, if any movement has to be executed through the limbs, that is through your hand. Okay, so along with that, your posture, there should be preparedness in your trunk, that is the axial skeleton. Okay, so your posture has to be maintained. So all these preparedness to execute any movements. Okay, so that also is helped by the basal ganglia. So it helps in preparedness to execute a movement, it helps in initiating the movement, it breaks the movement so that there is a stop. Okay, or there is inhibition of involuntary movements or stereotyped movements, and also it helps in motor programs and motor learning, and it helps in non-declarative type of memory. Okay, which is also called as implicit memory. There are two types, declarative and non-declarative. Declarative needs consciousness. For example, if you want to remember a date or a phone number, all those needs consciousness, so that's called as declarative memory. There is non-declarative memory, which is mainly coordinated by different parts of the central nervous system. One of them is the basal ganglia, like learning some procedural skills, or when you are riding a bicycle or drawing something. So complete consciousness is not necessary. So some motor skills, some habits, all these come under non-declarative memory, which is also one of the functions which is also controlled and managed by basal ganglia. a quick recap on the pathways, direct and indirect pathway. So I had mentioned the basal ganglia are broadly categorized into input nuclei, which receives the information. Then they have output nuclei, and they have intrinsic nuclei. So input nuclei mainly receives the information, that is the neostriatum, which includes caudate and putamen. So they receive the information mainly from three sources: the cortex, thalamus, and the substantia nigra compacta, which goes to the caudate nucleus and putamen. The output nuclei are those structures which send which sends the information to the thalamus. Okay, so the output nuclei includes the internal segment of the globus pallidus and substantia nigra pars reticulata. So they form the output nuclei, and there are intrinsic nuclei where there are connections with the external segment of the globus pallidus and subthalamic nucleus. So these form the intrinsic nuclei. Okay, so mainly the efferent information, so the information comes from the cortex and the thalamus. Okay, so it comes to the striatum, it is received by the neostriatum, and then the process where the interpretation and the further process takes place within the basal ganglia system, and then through the output nuclei the information projects to the thalamus, and then it projects back to the cortex, so mainly to the supplementary motor area. So when you see the neurotransmitters, for the appropriate functioning of the basal ganglia, there is influence from different neurotransmitters, but for the proper functioning it mainly requires dopamine. Okay, it has to be it mainly comes from the substantia nigra pars compacta, which goes to the striatum, and the dopamine action depends upon the receptors, whether it is D1 and or D2 receptors. So dopamine has a dual excitatory function. That means through the D1 receptors they mainly influence the direct pathway, and through D2 receptors they inhibit the indirect pathway. So when you see the neurons present in the striatum, so the neurons which have connection to the indirect pathway, that is the neurons which are connecting to the globus pallidus externa, so they express through D2 receptors. So that's why when the dopamine binds with the D2 receptors, so these neurons are inhibited, so that the indirect pathway is inhibited. Okay, and the neurons which are present in the striatum, which are involved in direct pathway, that is which has connection to the globus pallidus interna directly, so they mainly express D1 receptors, so that the dopamine, when it binds to the D1 receptors, so this will facilitate the direct pathway. So this is how the dopamine controls and regulates the different pathway, the direct. So they have a dual excitatory influence. So depending upon the pathways which are affected in different diseases, so there can be hypokinetic effect or hyperkinetic effect, which I have already discussed in my first part of the video. So in hypokinetic, the direct pathway is compromised. So as I mentioned, direct pathway helps in initiating the movements. So the patient mainly has difficulty in initiating, so they might have akinesia. Okay, or sometimes they can have slow movements, slowness in the movements, that's called as bradykinesia. Okay, so this is typically seen in Parkinson's disease. And there is an opposing effect, that is the hyperkinetic effect. Okay, where indirect pathway is compromised. So this is mainly seen in Huntington's disease. Okay, so what happens, since indirect pathway helps in controlling all involuntary movements, so since this pathway is compromised and there is over excitation of direct pathway, so there will be excessive involuntary movements. Okay, so the patient will have excessive involuntary movements, and they present with the different like coriform type of movements, balismus. So all these movements are seen in their limbs and also in the face. Okay, so this is typically seen in Huntington's disease. So this picture I've already shown in my first video, the receptors, the D1 receptors and D2 receptors. Okay, D1 mainly facilitates direct pathway, so helps in facilitating the movement, and D2 receptors, they inhibit indirect pathway. So it depends upon the receptors. So the neurons which are connected to the internal segment of globus pallidus, so they express D1 receptors, and the neurons which are connected to the external segment of globus pallidus, which mainly initiates indirect pathway, they express D2 receptors. So basal ganglia lesion may lead to hypokinetic or hyperkinetic disorders. So as I mentioned earlier, so hypokinetic, so direct pathway is compromised, so the patient will have difficulty in initiating the movement, so no initiative to perform a movement, or sometimes they have they might lag behind in initiating the movement. So if there is no initiative, that's called as akinesia. If they have slowness in the movement, that's called as bradykinesia. Along with that, they have loss of emotion related motor responses, so they have emotional paralysis, but normal motor movements they will respond. Okay, so whenever you do ask them to do some voluntary movements, they are able to do that, but on emotion related motor response, they have emotional paralysis. Okay, and hyperkinetic movement, where indirect pathway is compromised, so the patient will have excessive involuntary movements. Okay, there will be complete activation of direct pathway, so the patient might present with chorea, balismus, dystonia, athetosis. So these are different types of involuntary movements. So chorea, where they have pseudo-percussive involuntary movement. So this was a vignette which I had presented in my first video. So this vignette mainly shows the features of Parkinson's disease, where the patient is having history of slowing down in his movements, and he has difficulty to do daily course like dressing, shaving, which cannot be done efficiently, and his handwriting has changed, mainly his signature. Okay, and he has a stooped posture, monotonous voice, pill rolling movements in his hands, and cog wheel type of rigidity. Okay, so these are the features of, and mask like face, that is emotional paralysis. Okay, so these are typical features of Parkinson's disease. Okay, it's also called as paralysis agitans or shaking palsy. Usually paralysis is a misnomer, because the patient won't have a complete loss of movement, because corticospinal tract is totally, the pyramidal system is normal, but the extrapyramidal system, that is the basal ganglia, is affected. So the features, the characteristic features are tremors. So here you see resting tremors. Okay, if you see in a cerebellar lesion, the patient will have intention tremors. So whenever they are approaching to do some movement, okay, purposeful movement, so you can see the tremors. But in patient suffering with Parkinson's, they have resting tremors. So that's why you can see pill rolling movements, that is due to the alternative contraction of agonist and antagonist muscles. Okay, so that's why they have pill rolling movement. Rigidity, this is due to the increase in the resistance, increase in the tone. Okay, so mainly typically the patient will have cogwheel type of rigidity. If you know cogwheel, okay, so whenever in this patient, whenever you do a passive movement, so they will have cogwheel, that is on and off resistance. Okay, so it is cogwheel type of rigidity. Okay, but if it's the upper motor neuron lesion, that is involving corticospinal tract, so there also there will be increase in muscle tone. So there you see spasticity. Okay, so there mainly you will be seeing clasp knife rigidity or clasp knife spasticity. Okay, but here you can see rigidity where the entire group of muscles are involved, and throughout the movement, passive movement, the patient will have resistance. Okay, so here cogwheel has resistance throughout the passive movement. The patient will have the resistance, so it will be on and off. Okay, cogwheel type of rigidity. Then they have akinesia, that is difficulty in initiating the movement. So once they initiate, the movement will be very slow. Okay, and they have difficulty to stop. So whenever they are try to stop the movement, they'll have a shuffling and festinate type of gait. Okay, typically seen in elderly. So this is more common as the age increases above 45 or 50 years of age. Postural and gait disturbances. Okay, and dementia, that is loss of memory, can be a late outcome which is not seen at the initial period. Okay, so there will be progressive degenerative lesion of nigrostriatal pathway, that is the substantia nigra pars compacta, which is sending information to the striatum. So that is mainly compromised. So mainly it releases dopamine, so there is deficiency of dopamine which can lead to this disease. So slow stooped posture, narrow based, so festinant gait as though running in an irradical way with difficulty initiating or stopping once begin, shuffling gait. Okay, and the pill rolling movement. Okay, so along and the rigidity will be accompanied with the tremors, and this tremors usually it is absent during sleep. So one of the cardinal features is akinesia, lack of initiating the movement. It's not paralysis, but they have difficulty. Secondary semi-automatic movements are not often affected. Okay, and they'll present with emotional paralysis, hypokinesia or bradykinesia. This was the second vignette, a second type of disease which has a totally opposite features. Okay, so and this is mainly seen in middle-aged persons. So this is an autosomal dominant inherited disease which is called as Huntington's disease. So here the indirect pathway is compromised and the patient will have coriform involuntary movements. That's the coriform movements where there is rapid, jerky, dance-like pseudo-purposive involuntary movements mainly seen in the distal limbs. Okay, mainly in the hands and legs. So you will be seeing, and with twitching of the face, that is called as face grimacing. Okay, so this is called as, the chorea is called as Huntington's chorea, and the disease is called as Huntington's disease. It is often associated with degenerative lesions in the caudate nucleus. Okay, so caudate nucleus is one of the neostriatum which receives the input. So here there is degeneration, and this will be accompanied by secondary hydrocephalus, that is there will be, due to the degeneration, so there will be enlargement of the lateral ventricle. So this is in Huntington's disease where you can see enlargement of the ventricle. This is in the normal, so this is the MRI scan. So ventricle here, degeneration of caudate nucleus which is present here. You can compare with the normal specimen. So as you know, caudate nucleus mainly receives the information from the thalamus, substantia nigra, and also from the cerebral cortex, and it is mainly associated with the frontal, parietal and the temporal lobes, and also with the amygdala. So they have a major role in the cognitive function or the executive functions. So when in this disease, when there is damage to the caudate nucleus, the patient will have extensive compromise in the cognitive function. So that's why the patient presented with irrational behavior, okay, and also had dementia, okay, loss of memory. So that's the long-term memory which is mainly affecting the non-declarative type of memory. So this is one of the tests they do if they are suspecting Huntington's disease in a patient. So learn to draw between two lines of a star looking. So they have difficulty to draw, okay, so which is a type of non-declarative type. So the patient with Huntington's disease are poor at learning these tasks. Okay, so they have difficulty in doing these motor skills. Okay, mainly due to disorder of the caudate nucleus, which is very important for non-declarative type of learning. So that completes the part 2 of basal ganglia. These are my references.